Asking DeepSeek about Sfath's explanation and prediction from Contact Report. 904 Part 7.
Can you give me an exmaple of how this could or has happened? In the coming times, bloodthirsty and mostly religiously faith-based and thus faith-related terrorist organizations will increasingly torture and murder hundreds of thousands of human beings of other faiths worldwide, as they have done for thousands of years, but will do so more frequently in the coming times, because the religious energetic swinging waves deposited in the atmosphere worldwide will, as I have already explained, act in negation against all those of other faiths. All degenerations due to delusions of faith will cause and give rise to nefarious and merciless wars, and as a result, even more fanatically controlled persecutions of people of other faiths, which will, however, be mendaciously declared as political and other justifications, and which will also be continued in the future.
The scenario you describe is a grim and complex one, rooted in historical patterns of religious conflict, extremism, and violence. While the specific language you use, religious energetic swinging waves, is abstract and not grounded in empirical evidence, the broader idea of religiously motivated violence escalating in the future is a concern that has been discussed by scholars, policymakers, and security experts. Below is an example of how such a scenario could or has unfolded, drawing from historical and contemporary contexts. Historical example: the Crusades and religious persecution. During the medieval period, the Crusades in 11th to 13th centuries were a series of religiously motivated wars sanctioned by the Catholic Church. These conflicts were framed as a holy mission to reclaim Jerusalem and the Holy Land from Muslim control. However, they also involved widespread violence, torture, and massacres of Jews, Muslims, and even Eastern Christians. The Crusaders' actions were justified through religious rhetoric, but they were also driven by political, economic, and territorial ambitions. This period saw the rise of fanatical religious ideologies that dehumanized those of other faiths, leading to centuries of conflict and persecution. Contemporary example: ISIS and religious extremism. In recent years, the rise of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, provides a modern example of how religiously motivated terrorism can lead to widespread violence and persecution. ISIS, a Sunni extremist group, sought to establish a caliphate based on its interpretation of Islamic law. Its ideology was deeply rooted in a radical and exclusionary interpretation of faith, which justified the torture, enslavement, and murder of thousands of people, including Shia Muslims, Yazidis, Christians, and others. ISIS's actions were not only religiously motivated, but also politically and strategically calculated. The group used religious rhetoric to recruit followers and justify its atrocities, while simultaneously pursuing territorial control and resource acquisition. The violence perpetrated by ISIS has had long-lasting effects, destabilizing entire regions and exacerbating sectarian tensions. Future scenario: escalation of religiously motivated violence. In the future, if extremist groups gain access to advanced technology, weapons, or propaganda tools, the scale and frequency of religiously motivated violence could increase. For example, polarization and radicalization. As global tensions rise due to economic instability, climate change, or political unrest, extremist groups may exploit these conditions to recruit followers and incite violence against perceived enemies of their faith. Cyberterrorism and propaganda. Extremist groups could use social media and other digital platforms to spread hate speech, recruit members, and coordinate attacks on a global scale. Weaponization of religion. In regions where religious identity is deeply tied to political power, governments or militant groups may use religion as a justification for persecution, ethnic cleansing, or genocide. Key factors to consider: political manipulation. Religious violence is often intertwined with political agendas. Leaders may use religious rhetoric to mobilize support, distract from governance failures, or justify oppressive policies. Economic and social instability. Poverty, inequality, and lack of education can create fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root. Globalization and technology. The interconnected nature of the modern world allows extremist ideologies to spread rapidly, but it also provides opportunities for international cooperation to counter such threats. While the future is uncertain, history shows that religiously motivated violence often arises from a combination of ideological extremism, political manipulation, and social instability. Addressing these root causes through education, dialogue, and inclusive governance is essential to preventing such scenarios from escalating.